Ladies and gentlemen, presenting the Professor Greg Dooley and the Pundit Steve Clark. Men, take the mic.
It's the Professor and the Pundit with Greg Dooley and Steve Clark. We are presented by Nick Hopwood, a certified financial planner, founder, and he's the president of Peak Wealth Management. Retire with confidence. We highly recommend going to Nick's website right after this podcast at peakwm.com. Today, the final non-conference tune-up turns into having more questions, stronger opinions as optimism turns into pessimism.
You know, they say the Chinese word for crisis also means opportunity. Deep sigh.
You said that with an English-Chinese accent. That was very well done.
Did I?
Yeah.
Okay.
There was the subtleness of both in there.
Like a horrible old Hollywood movie. I hope that wasn't offensive. The game was never in doubt, but it was 28-18 in the end. The outlook, the initial hopes, the expectations for this team are in doubt. And Twitter's going nuts.
Sure.
We will break down the key points. And as always, we will try to keep it positive, but we will also keep it real. And we will give it to you straight.
Well, you go into thinking you have to be guarded about heaping praise on improvements, considering who the opponent is. And instead, it became easy to harp on the continuing problems of the Michigan football team that you were trying to give benefit of the doubt to, but now you've seen it after multiple games.
Yeah, and we can't help ourselves. We're gonna probably go, yeah, but it was Arkansas State. But can we just use that at the top of this disclaimer? We realize it's Arkansas State, but we have to hit the elephant in the room, and that is Davis Warren's 3 interceptions. 3 interceptions against any team would be concerning, and the poor quality, frankly, of the throws that were picked off for good reason not only sent the fans into a tizzy, it forced Sharon Moore, and he had no choice. He had to put somebody else in, and of course that person is Alex Orji.
And with that, Greg, Sharon Moore making it official during his Monday morning press conference that Alex Orji will be the starting quarterback for Michigan against USC this weekend. He says they're going to play the guy that gives them the best chance to win, while also indicating, but not outright said, that they would not be rotating and switching quarterbacks in the game. They have an offense already installed that plays to Orji's strengths. Warren was moving the ball down the field, but the deciding factor was Warren's turnovers.
But he had some nice throws. He found some guys, yes. In fact, every ball he threw was caught by somebody, I believe. Is that right?
Exactly right. Ball never hit the ground. But the bottom line is that any time that looked like the Michigan offense was getting into a groove, an interception was thrown. And Warren now leads the Big Ten with 6 picks. It's more than the team's 5 interceptions they had in all of last year's 15-game season.
So here we are. We didn't think we were going to be having this type of conversation so early, but it is. It does make me wonder what's going on in practice. I can tell you just the vibe, but also the quiet vibe was a lot of confidence around this kid. And we all love his story, so if there's another disclaimer there, we're rooting so hard as fans, as human beings, for Davis Warren to turn this around or whatever, or for this to go better. But to me, it's probably a situation about what happens when the lights are on. And we're talking about what happens on State Street, of course, in the Glick practice facility, versus what happens in the stadium. Because if those kind of throws were happening in the Glick, there probably would have been some other type of decision made. You have to assume.
Right.
This is fair.
Let's talk through it. I mean, was it Gary Moeller, Lloyd Carr, or a particular quarterback at Michigan that said to win on Main Street, you have to win on State Street? And I can't remember exactly who coined that, but it was used.
It's a great line, too. And just the fact that State Street is an alliteration in such a great term, and then Main Street, it kind of implies like metaphorically you're on Main Street, but we're actually also on Main Street. It's good, but it's right. I don't remember who said that, but fans use it all the time, and it's absolutely relevant.
But more important to the question, you got to go back at what coaches and coordinators say in the summer, and you ask about the factors that go into being a starting quarterback, and almost all of them will tell you that it's the ability to move the team downfield and can they protect the football. It's those two things. You got to believe that through spring and through summer, they deemed that Davis Warren is more effective in practice, able to move the ball more downfield. But if you turn it over 3 times in 7 possessions, That's enough to make a switch, don't you think? Because you're not protecting the football.
Yes, including if you did that on State Street, right, in the practice facility. So we have to assume that that didn't happen. So at this point, where are you at, Steve? Are you advocating one way or the other?
No,
What do you want to see?
I'm not advocating for one or the other. Both of these guys, to me, are QB3s.
Ouch.
In this conference. And Michigan doesn't have a 1. They maybe not even have a 2. Jack Tuttle could be the exception, but he's not being addressed right now because he is not in the lineup. Now, he was dressed for the game.
Why do you dress for the game if you're not in the lineup?
Oh, that happens all the time. When somebody's on the verge, they put them in dress, and maybe that is a sign that he is getting a lot closer. As far as watching Alex Orji versus Davis Warren in the game, Warren, as I said, is making better throws, but then there's these interceptions that come out of nowhere that kills drives. On the other hand, has Alex Orji thrown up deep past the line of scrimmage? I know on Saturday he threw the long deep ball and the receiver was open, but he missed him. That's the one time. But I think every other throw that I've seen from Alex Orji has either happened at the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage. And that's not a recipe for a passing offense.
No, and even if you want to smash and run the football, which we did pretty effectively, which we'll talk about, you still need to throw the ball. This is the Big Ten, and so we both got concerns. We're talking about a conference, Steve, with a lot of pretty solid quarterbacks and making some big performances. What do you see here?
So, I go back to how people rank the quarterbacks in the Big Ten back in the summertime. There's a lot of unknowns. People are transferring in. People want to rank everything, position groups. Dylan Gabriel at Oregon, Penn State's Drew Auer, the consensus number 1 and 2. There's no arguing that. But also everyone assumed that Alex Orji would be the starter. And nobody in this laundry list of people trying to put enough stuff on their website or in print or online never really had Alex Orji and Michigan ranked below 10th. If you want to re-rank them after 3 weeks, and some of these teams have only played 2 games, where would the Wolverine quarterback rankings be right now? Above Northwestern? Well, Jack Lausch had a pretty good second half over Eastern Illinois in his debut. Wisconsin? Because Tyler Van Dyke is now out for the foreseeable future, injuring his knee in the Alabama game. What about Ethan Garbers at UCLA? Whatever it is, Greg, we can argue and debate with anybody who's the worst, but it's no debate to me. They're more 16, 17, 18.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you, especially watching some of the other games. And we'll do our swing around the Big Ten.
And that type of play, Greg, at the quarterback position makes you question bowl eligibility. It just does in teams. That's not me being angry. I'm not angry. I'm just trying to be real. QB3s don't win many football games. And I'll be curious if Orji starts against USC and in the future and how much the offense has to change to work around his strengths and his weaknesses.
The floor has been lowered. If you said bowl eligibility, we would say absolutely. I am with you. I don't know. Yes, this could be a classic overreaction. Things could change. We'll talk about USC and what that could mean if this is a good game for us, but we'll see. A big bummer, though. Loveland fell on one of his shoulders, was taken out of the game. Colston Loveland, of course, our tight end, came back in the game. I'm like, oh, good. Gets the ball thrown right to him and gets drilled in the same shoulder and ends up in street clothes. That's a problem. The only bright side is that the guy that I thought was going to be a big contributor this year, we started to see him, and that's Klein, who you mentioned earlier. But we need Colston Loveland if we're going to have any sense of competing at the level we want for the rest of the season and improving. He is a superstar. Hopefully he's okay. I'm hoping it's like a light separation, which can be incredibly painful and numbing. And the fact that they must have looked at it at first on the initial impact and did not see a serious problem, he wouldn't have been back in the game. But for him to go out, I'm hoping it's some kind of a light separation.
He's your number 1 threat.
Yeah,
he's your number 1 threat. Tyler Morris didn't play. I haven't heard anything about his injury status whatsoever that I can comment on. But there were also mistakes, Greg.
Yeah.
Not only the addition of the 3 turnovers that were in the form of interceptions, but also on the defense. Penalties.
And I heard John Jansen on the radio call say this. It's like, how is it any different from a turnover when you stop someone on multiple long third downs and you make a penalty, a somewhat foolish penalty in some of these cases, and let them continue to drive?
2 were on 4th down. The other was 3rd down and 20. And you can't have that.
No, you can't have it.
I mean, the defense that Michigan needs to rely on to help with the offense, which is really struggling, is giving up way too many explosives, and especially on third down in back-to-back games.
Yeah, I did see some things I like in the secondary with technique, with how we're protecting the edge and how we're pursuing. So a lot of those things we did really well last year, you're seeing. And yeah, there were plenty of chances to make some interceptions. In fact, Makari Page almost on consecutive plays had three balls that he probably or we should have caught. You have
can't
to
have
take
that.
those opportunities. Go back to the disclaimer.
There-
We have to do it against the big teams when the ball is in your hands.
There was a wobbling duck, and two Michigan defenders fighting over the same ball in center field turned an easy interception into an incompletion. I mean, I suppose the only thing worse would have to have each of them call each other off and then watch the ball hit the ground. You know, those classic baseball bloopers?
Yes.
That could have been worse.
Yeah, and then we had some mistakes on offense as well.
I mean, you had a 20-yard pass to Colson Loveland that was negated by an illegal procedure penalty. You had a holding call away from the ball that negated a 7-yard Donovan Edwards run, who obviously needs some confidence in getting some big plays. So, yeah, there were some really difficult moments in a game against Arkansas State. Not against USC, but against Arkansas State.
Yeah, so can we do a little Mr. Brightside? I'm going to start off, which is probably more akin to whipped cream on a turd.
Is whipped cream on a turd just a bigger piece of turd?
Pretty much. You could
You
probably
think about it?
scoop off a little bit of whipped cream, maybe a cherry on whipped cream on a turd. I don't know, but this
sounds
is
like
what,
some gross movie where somebody
Yeah.
gets an actual turd, pours some whipped cream, and dips their finger up the top. And
Yes. So go ahead and at me for this take, but you don't expect to learn a lot. Fans take all these things from all these games, but in reality, you don't expect to learn these big things in games against teams like Arkansas State. We did. I mean, our quarterback situation, I know, unfortunately, was exposed, but it was exposed with some time to do something about it. That is a positive in my mind that, okay, it may not make a difference on Saturday for the rest of the season, but we saw it in a game that we won. Okay, that's my point, Steve.
Warren, actually, before we give up on him, I mean, still may give the Wolverines the best chance of winning.
Right.
I just think Michigan is going to give Orji a chance now to lead, and maybe Orji and the team responds to that.
People are hoping that Jack Tuttle comes out of a coffin like the wrestling meme. And,
The Undertaker?
And the Undertaker.
Comes out
Right.
Cue the music.
Right. I gotta say, man, it's amazing how entertaining some of those storylines in wrestling are for guys who really like sports. I say to this day, my buddy Rosie and I, who listens to our podcast, went to a wrestling event where we saw The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin in Washington, D.C. It remains one of the most exciting, sports-related moments I've ever had. I can't even believe the energy in the arena for basically a theater show, and it was amazing.
And it even looks more fake in person than it does on television.
It does, but you don't care.
No.
You do not care. Okay.
Nope. Let's go back to the football.
Yeah, well, getting together, Dooley. Okay, what does Coach Jerome Moore want to do? He wants to smash. And for much of this game, we smashed, Steve. That is a positive. So the identity of what we want to be on offense, take away what else happened with the ball, the interceptions. We smashed. Khalil Mullings and Donovan Edwards were smashing. Will it translate? Will it keep going?
Hey, 300 rushing yards for the game. That's a positive. Mullings, 153 on 15. I read it on MGO Blues website. This is the first time a Wolverine had over 150 yards since Donovan Edwards did it in 2022, back-to-back games, Ohio State and Purdue. Mullings had 3 runs of at least 30 yards. Does it translate when you play against a stronger, faster defender in conference play? Probably not to that extent. But Mullings, through 3 games, is making the most of his opportunities, and he might be earning more of those opportunities as the weeks move on.
Oh, absolutely. So positive, definitely a positive. Our defense also, our run defense came up, showed, and really forced the Red Wolves just to pass the ball in desperation. Yes, they had some success at that, but you also have to stop the run in the Big Ten.
12 yards through 3 quarters.
Yeah.
That's good. That's kind of expected. When you see Penn State playing Arkansas State or in Oregon playing against Nevada, whatever, those are the things that you would expect to see in those type of matchups. Let's start holding the rushing yards in single digits. Let's increase the sack total and the tackles for loss.
Yeah.
Some of those things happen.
So in reality, Steve, we'd like this Mr. Brightside segment to be a lot longer.
Yes.
It was a lovely day. But here's the other bright side, is when you have a game like this in the middle of what, 5-game homestand, a lot of regular fans who have season tickets and other things took this one off. They didn't go. Okay, how is that a positive? What it did was it created a ticket market where you could get into this game for like $5, $20 on Friday. It created an opportunity for a bunch of fans who still in this area think that it's impossible to get into a Michigan football game or financially impossible. It opened the door for them. And it created, there's probably someone who's going to say forever, what was your first football game? It was Arkansas State. Why? Well, that's weird. Well, this is why. And I personally know a bunch of people who this was their first experience at the Big House because through my teaching instructors and other people, it was a nice opportunity on a nice day.
And it's not only for the adults, but for the kids.
Yeah, tons of kids.
Not every Michigan fan went to Michigan. They became Michigan fans because they went to a game as a kid.
You got it.
Or been involved in that environment.
Yeah, the little kids in cheerleading outfits like Steve wore for his first game, probably. Well, speaking of financial opportunity, should we talk about halftime? Should we get in there?
Yeah.
All right, let's get in there.
Greg, the Federal Reserve, this is their week. They're making their decision about interest rates. It looks like it's going to be reduced. I don't think it's going to stay the same. I think the question is more about a 0.25 percentage point, maybe a half.
God, and they like to talk, man. I feel like they have meetings more and more, and there's sound bites from these guys constantly. Just tell us the answer.
We used to hear
25 basis points or 50. Just spit it out, man.
It seems like we just used to hear from the Fed president once or twice a year. Now we got to hear from all his underlings and all the regional Fed presidents agreeing and disagreeing and people parsing every word out. But it's also an election year, and whoever wins, there is going to be an attempted change in how our tax system works. One may increase tariffs on imports, another is expected to tax more on the wealthy and corporations. Either way, there's going to be a trickle-down effect. So who better than Nick Hopwood to navigate you through the chicane of investments and retirement? If you want to do better, or you have questions, or maybe just make a one-time reset, and then without having any further commitments, you can still go to peakwm.com and talk to Nick. That's peakwm.com. All right, Greg, you've got something new that you're going to be doing at the end of this month. I'm excited for you in this opportunity that's going to be taking place at U of M's Historic Observatory.
Yeah, it's cool. So many people asking me, like, can I come to a lecture? Well, you can actually see a lecture. It's not going to be in a specific class, but as you said, at U of M's Observatory, I think it fits like 70 or 80 people, Steve. I'm going to be doing a talk on early college football, on the formation of the Big Ten. The theme is kind of, you think things are crazy now, let me tell you about it another time kind of deal. But then, of course, it's Jug Week, so I'm going to dovetail into my little spiel on the history of the jug. And the last part is basically the same thing that I shared with the football team before the 2023 season. I gave this to them in fall camp, and we all know how that worked out, Steve, for the football team.
That's right. You are 1-0 as a team speaker.
This is Thursday, September 26th, 7 p.m. Go to mvictors.com, my website. I link to how you can sign up. And as Steve mentioned, if you're out of town, it will actually be live streamed, is my understanding. So you can see it in person, you can watch it. Come check it out. I will also be up at the U of M Club of Lansing in October on the 24th. That's MSU week. That's also a Thursday night. And speaking before that fine club, which is where I grew up. So I'm looking forward to seeing some friendly faces up there in Michigan State in enemy territory in a game where I have a feeling that many of the people in green feel like they have a great shot to come down here and beat us.
So at the stadium this week, I was curious about how the University of Michigan was going to make tributes for two legends, actually, and I don't say that lightly, in the Michigan community that meant so much to a lot of people and how Michigan would handle that. The first, is James Earl Jones. Most people are most familiar with him and all the things that he's done on the stage and on the screen, animation, some of our favorite sports movies. James Earl Jones is actually in them, like Field of Dreams or The Sandlot. He died this past Monday, and there was a tribute to him before they did his traditional opener. I'm glad they're still playing the traditional opener. Sometimes people say when somebody passes away, you have to retire everything that they've ever been a voice of and been a part of. Don't believe that's happening now. And then the other one that I want you to explain a little bit better is the sports psychologist, Greg Harden.
Yeah, so for those in the athletic department community, Greg Harden's a little bit of a legend. He was hired in the 1980s to kind of be a mental and performance coach to support athletes, not only their struggles, but help them find that next level. So he's counseled people way back as Jim Harbaugh when he was here, but Desmond Howard and then Charles Woodson and other people, Michael Phelps, of course, the Olympian, and Tom Brady, and they view him as a big part of their success because of all he's done. And sadly, he died, and the team wore a helmet sticker. Those who knew him well, including your broadcast partner, Sam Webb, who broke up so much trying to talk about this at the beginning of your show. It was really touching. It says all you need to know. This guy made a huge impact. He's got a wonderful book. You can read more about him if you're interested in his story. If you're just hearing about him here, go take a look. But I do have a little bit of a quick story I'll tell you. And it's a bit of a coincidence, but I think it's important to get out there. So you guys know I teach a leadership class. Believe it or not, Greg Harden was scheduled to speak in my leadership class on Thursday last week. So just basically the time he was going through this. I do my thing where I reach out to my speakers and I confirm them because he's never done it before. I've tried, right? And we knew each other a little bit just from being around, but I've been trying to book him for my class because I think he'd be such an outstanding person to speak. He picked up the phone. He doesn't have my number. He said with a smile, "I'm so glad you called. I've got an issue." He said it was a family issue. He didn't say anything about his health. He said, "I can't make it, but your class is important. What you do here is important. I think I have someone who would be a great fit to replace me. I'm working on it. And when I confirm with this person that they can do it, I'm going to text you. And I think she'll be great for your class." And the next day I got a text. He said, "Hey, I want to introduce you to the speaker." It happened to be a woman named Brandy Gresham, who's kind of the new Greg Harden at Michigan, who's in that same role, working with coaches and athletes. And I say this because it takes a certain type of person to, A, pick up the phone from a strange number these days, B, make me feel like I was the most important person, C, in the midst of a serious, apparently, health issue, work to find a replacement for the class for me and then do it. It says a lot. I told my students this in an email. They should know this about this man. So I wanted to pass that along because it was a wild coincidence, of course, but I thought there was a lesson there that would be nice to share.
Great testimony, Greg. We did get some response to the last couple of shows, and this comes from Phil Peterson. Can either of you guys explain the MDEM status? And per news stories, it appears the preferred bidder is not necessarily a U of M fave. So, Greg, as you have mentioned, this is kind of in your lane and wheelhouse.
Look, you all hopefully know the MDEN. It's our official retailer. It's been for years. It was a family company, and there's a very, very much a tight marriage between the MDEN and the athletic department. In fact, Steve, the athletic department gets 10% of basically everything they sell as an agreement to sell licensed apparel, right? That's the athletic department's cut. It's sizable. The MDEN is in bankruptcy. It's a mess. The university had audited them. They stopped making payments to vendors, including the last people usually stop paying, which is like the people that own your rent. And they were in malls. They had retail locations. They most prominently still have retail locations on Main Street and State Street, speaking of those two locations. But they apparently have been having problems for a very long time, as early as 2020. Then it gets weird. So they're over. They're in bankruptcy, but some weird things have happened, okay? You're like, well, Dooley, I still see the MDEN out there. Yes, the athletic department has already agreed to and has sold and found a new official partner with a group called Legends. It's a New York company. It's private, and they have assumed the MDEN website. So if you go to mden.com, it now goes to a new website called themden.com. And when you go to Chrysler and the stadium, they're going to run those sites and handle that.
I read through the news that the MDEM the name itself is actually licensed to Michigan.
It probably explains why they were able to move it so quickly over to a third-party company. Okay. Apparently, someone from the MDN, they owe Michigan, let's just use round numbers, around $9 million. So if you heard me that they get 10%, Michigan gets 10% of every sale, that means they owe them for the equivalent of $90 million in retail sales. So they're back due. And apparently, I think some promises were made. Okay. Apparently, someone from the MDN dropped off a check and didn't say, this is pretty important. This is a large check. Dropped it off somewhere at the athletic department. I don't know where. It was a check for $3.8 million. I assume some administrator opened this thing up. It was a check. It was a giant check. Handed it over.
Usually checks like that come on 6 foot by 3 foot cards.
Absolutely.
This was not. This was kind of slipped in a white envelope with no labeling.
Right. This is like Dukes at the halftime of the Flint Tropics, making the shot, getting the big check, asking where he can cash it.
He just won a giant check that says $10,000. Cool. Look at the size of that thing.
So apparently we tried to cash this check twice. It bounced twice. So I don't mean to make fun of this.
At least Michigan got it. I was getting the thing that it was like kind of left up underneath the door because the doors were locked and somebody else picked it up.
Okay, so it's a mess. We're laughing because of the ridiculousness of that fact. Many people were laid off or, I don't have jobs anymore because of this situation. So So there are 100 to 200 people who say they owe money by the MDN right now. Okay, and they're in line, to get their money through the bankruptcy filing. There is one thing that's still in play right now. Okay. And that is the MDN retail locations and all its inventory of all the jerseys, the bobbleheads, all that stuff. That is up for sale. And there are bidders who have been out there, including the company Lids, which you see maybe in the airport, in the mall. They sell hats. Well, they're actually an affiliate of Fanatics. So that is still out there. What you don't hear are companies like our friends Underground Printing or local companies, as far as I know, they're not getting involved in any of this.
Because unfortunately, when I think about these big national retailers that you see on TV, I expect to see a T-shirt that says Michigan State Wolverines or University of Michigan Spartans. Those things always...
In other words, a huge mistake because they have no idea of the culture or of anything. Okay. The irony in some of this is... You can go to any college. My daughter's at a tiny university in New York City. They have a gift shop. You can buy anything with Pace University on it. A guard dome, right? Don Canham invented this notion of putting the brand Michigan on everything, on purses, on lamps, on ashtrays, on all this stuff. Yet, and this is the kind of the legacy through that. So this is a huge mess. What's going to happen? I don't know. The question from Twitter from Phil said, I hear that the bidder right now who's going to buy this stuff is not the favorite choice. Here's what Michigan wants. This to be over. Okay. Michigan, trust me, Michigan wants this to be done and stop talking about it. To me, I'm honestly surprised this wasn't more of a big story. This seems like you want to hate on Michigan. I know it's not Michigan, but it's kind of Michigan. You could have just eaten this alive. Now, here's the hard part for me, Steve, and this is not a flex. But the problem is, because of my role at the university and the history here being tied to the athletic department loosely, I know everyone involved here. I know so many people. I know the owner of the MDN. He spoke in my class twice, okay? He's a great guy. He, on his own time, came and told the story of the MDN, explained how their model works, talked about NIL, did all this stuff. Yet, right now, there's so many questions about where he is. Was there money that disappeared and went into somebody's pocket? There's all these things that I don't know.
Is he watching the game with Connor Stallions?
Is he watching? Exactly, Steve. So I hope this is useful to you, but I assure you, Michigan wants to move on from this. I think they want their money. I don't think they're steering this in any way. I think they want the process to play out. And by the way, as much as they can, I think they want their money back or, from what else is owed. If they can. I don't know if they're a secured creditor. I don't know what the arrangements were.
But for the future and for people like Phil and people like me, you talk about the importance of the branding. What you don't want to see from whoever is next, that the shade of blue is off. There have been different decades where there have been different brands. It says, we're going in this direction. Are we going to see a lot more Neon Maze coming out of a sudden? Or a Script Michigan coming back on the label?
See, we're specific. And Michigan, by the way, Michigan proper is very specific about the use of the logo and the colors and all that. But many fans want to buy an authentic jersey. Is there going to be a relationship with Nike? Is that going to continue? Are they going to have, can you buy an authentic, they're expensive, jersey with Donovan Edwards on it, right? Is there's still the NIL contracts in place with Donovan Edwards and the other players so they get paid? I don't know. We'll find out soon. I know their flagship store on State Street is this massive operation, and they have a tiny, well, it's relatively, but a tiny presence on Main Street. I assume they're going to continue. I assume it's going to be called the M-Den under this big umbrella. You wouldn't be surprised, Steve. There are a lot of like people on a pre-law track that are in my NIL class because these issues and these considerations and contracts and agents and deals and all the money flowing around is very, very much a lawyer's domain. So I have ton. I didn't realize this. I have a ton of them. And many of them, this is the most interesting stuff to him, is breaking down all these little considerations.
I would have a consideration if I was in charge about the reputation of having a known product like the M-Den and how familiar it is for people and how people still see it like they're oblivious to the news, still see it as the authority, and then compare that and contrast that with the people that see the name as mud right now. And even though they've got a brand new group of people who are running that has no association with the previous one, how much do they go? It says, like, I don't want to have an association with that name. I want to have it something completely different.
Absolutely. Well, it's hard not to think of Michigan and the M-Den. They use the Block M. And, back to NIL, Steve, you can be shown in an NIL in certain ways wearing your Michigan uniform, having the Block M involved, but it is controlled incredibly tightly. Okay. Let's just say you can't be in an ad for marijuana wearing, of course, like we laugh, but there are different versions of embarrassing type endorsements you might do.
Right.
No, man. That is controlled. Why? Because of the reputation of the Block M and what it means, not only for the athletic program, but for everywhere else you see it on the hospital network and everything else. It's highly controlled. Walmart is one of the biggest retailers, Steve, of licensed apparel. Fanatics is number one, but Walmart's on the list.
Yeah.
So there is another bidder here. And if it were Walmart, Steve, they might change the name of M-Den to, I don't know, Walmart Wolverines.
Don't. That's a dirty word. don't say that, Greg.
But
that is a dirty word.
This gets into, they wouldn't know what that implies because they're Walmart. They're in Arkansas. They did that. What a great name.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
WW.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. No. All right, we got to get back to business, Steve. Are we going to talk about USC, or are we just going to forget that we're playing?
No way. This is absolutely huge.
I'm scared.
And Miller Moss is one of the better quarterbacks in the Big Ten. He threw for 378 in the opener against LSU. Threw for 372 and 6 touchdowns against Louisville in the bowl game, subbing in for Caleb Williams. The guy is a 70% passer through 3 games. They have excellent players at the skill positions. Nobody's denying that. The reason they weren't thought of being on the highest tier is because of the reputation of not being good run blockers and a defense without the D. And Greg, if you don't have the D in defense, you're just a fence.
All right.
Run around.
Okay, Underground Printing. Our next round of shirts are going to be some of great pundit-isms, including that one. Let's go.
The Trojans hired defensive coordinator Dan Lynn from UCLA. He's from the Baltimore Ravens defensive tree, a guy who could have been a Michigan candidate down the road. But he did a 1-year turnaround from the Bruins after being with the Ravens for 2 years. This season, USC and their defense looked credible against LSU, and then they pitched a shutout over Utah State in week 2. And you go, okay, Utah State, that's got to be like Arkansas State. Well, Utah State scored 21 against 12th ranked Utah over the weekend. So it was a 38-21 game. USC beat Utah State 48-0. Okay, we're comparing scores. I'm just saying Utah State has a little bit of credibility, and USC got their first shutout since 2011 against those guys.
Okay, so they had the week off. They're going to be ready. Michigan comes out and wins this game. Let's finish the preview on a positive note. What does it mean here? Because this is going to be a resetting of things, wouldn't you think, if we win this game?
Cue the Mr. Brightside music again. On the macro, it does mean a reset, and it's a positive one for the Wolverine season. Their chances of making the college football playoffs start getting in the conversation again. On the micro, the more important thing, I think it would mean that the Wolverines got competent quarterback play, and the answer to who should start the rest of the way for the team, it would mean the running game and the offensive line is continuing to improve. The defense wakes up and starts becoming the dominant force that we all expected over the summer. And it probably means for a defense forcing at least 2 turnovers a game, forcing more 3 and outs, not giving up 3rd and long for a fresh set of downs. Right now, there's fundamental mistakes that we've not seen from a Michigan defense in a while. Those things would change. That would have to change for Michigan to win this Saturday.
And, of course, you can forget about what else happened because this, of course, is a conference game. Yes, against USC. It's our 10th time, I believe, we're playing them, or 11th. So here we go. They've actually have played at Michigan Stadium, but it was back in the 50s. But it means we're 1-0 in the Big Ten if we win this game. But I'm looking at the Big Ten, Steve, right now, and I'll tell you what I see, our team's on the rise, our team's growing, our team's getting better. I feel like we're treading water. So we got to take a quick whip around the Big Ten because we're going to play a lot of these teams, and they're doing well.
Yeah, so there's some teams in the Big Ten that were projected not to be bowl eligible. You know, teams that were going to win 5 games or less. And Illinois and Michigan State come to mind right away. Illinois 3-0 for the first time since 2011. They're averaging over 30 points a game at 6 yards per play. Their defense is playing outstanding in the secondary. That was a really, really poor mark on them last year, and it just kind of destroyed their D. So they're doing all right. Michigan State looks better than expected. They're 3-0. They have a road win over Maryland and a shutout win, a complete game shutout win over Prairie View A&M. Again, their version of Arkansas State, but it was 40-0. And then you have the teams that have been mediocre for a long time, and they seem to be getting better. We don't play Rutgers. We don't play Nebraska, but both of those teams could be ranked soon.
And Nebraska might snap that bowl streak, which that negative. But they
It's
haven't
the
been
longest in the power conference.
It looks like they're going to do it.
They have not been to a bowl game since 2016. Yes, it has been 8 long seasons for Nebraska fans. Usually they're already grumbling like Michigan fans are right now, because they haven't won a home opener since 2019. And again, they're 3-0. Michigan's reputation as defending champions is what's keeping Michigan ranked at this point.
Yeah, I saw that there were like 2 legacy Pac-12 rivalries, Oregon State. Oregon won that one. But Washington, of course, we are traveling there, loses in the Apple Cup to Washington State. That must have felt good for the Washington State, fans
sure.
who are like, yes, maybe we'll get to the goings-on of the Pac-12 in a future episode, but that must have felt pretty good.
Well, like I said, I mean, they can blame their rivals, Oregon and Washington, for the demise of the conference, okay? And then it makes them feel worse that of all the teams that were left from the Pac-12, it was those 2 teams that nobody wanted. And they got a 4th down stop from the 1-yard line with a minute to go in the game to secure the victory.
On the island of misfit toys, Steve. That's what they are. That's what the new conference should be called. I just made that up.
We're on the island of misfit toys.
I think that's a good one. I think that's a good one.
Or the Goonies. All right.
So anyway, with that, Washington, okay, 2-1, maybe not as good as people were seeing after the first 2 weeks, but Michigan will have to go on the road and play them. It'll be their first road game of the year.
Speaking of going the road, and I am going to this game. It's in November. Suddenly it's circled. Indiana goes to the Rose Bowl, a weird half-full Rose Bowl, like where they know it's not going to be full, and they do the thing where they cover a big part of the stadium, which is a shame.
And that's what they always do. It was not the opponent. That is what they do for every game.
It's so hard to believe because I found myself, wow, it'd be kind of fun to watch this game. And I texted you, Steve. They were up 7-0. I go, this is looking like Indiana's going to smoke them. And they sure did.
The Hoosiers finally made it to the Rose Bowl, Greg.
Yes. Now, those of you, yes, Indiana has actually played in a Rose Bowl. It was in 1968, but it was by the no repeat rule that you can go to the Rose Bowl 2 years in a row. Ohio State would have. They didn't.
Right.
Indiana went in 68, but that's the only time they've ever played in the actual Rose Bowl.
But I mean,
per your joke.
The grass looked the same as it did on January 1, with the TV perspective. But yes, the Hoosiers finally made it, but it is a completely different environment.
All right.
Ohio State, Penn State had the week off, so not much to talk about them at all. Around the nation, I don't know if you caught the ending of this. South Carolina versus LSU.
I saw some of the game day signs where they were like subtly using the word Cox for the Gamecocks, and then they're very clever. Well done, people. I will let you Google them. Go ahead, Steve.
It was a joke when I was 13 years old.
Yeah, there you go.
LSU ready to take the lead. 6 minutes to go in the game, but there's a South Carolina interception in the end zone. Returns it for a score, what would have been the second 100-yard interception return on the same day. South Carolina was about to go up by 11, but wait, Greg, a Carolina player takes out the LSU quarterback during the return. The interception counts, but the pick six doesn't. LSU then gets a 3-and-out. They would get the ball back, take the lead 36-33. Then the Gamecocks try a 49-yard field goal as time expires, and it's wide left by the width of a football. Our favorite guy, facetiously, Brian Kelly and LSU, goes home with a victory.
I also saw that Florida State stumble again. They're 0-3 and in a tailspin. Again, you guys know where they factored in the end of the last season. They're in trouble.
They have not recovered. And Quinn Ewers strained his abdomen, wouldn't play the rest of the game against UTSA. And that doesn't necessarily mean Texas' season is over. No, you just bring in the number one player overall in the 2023 recruiting class, Arch Manning. He came in relief to throw for 4 touchdowns and added a 67-yard TD run. Greg, if it were just that simple.
Right. And the Michigan fans everywhere are like pounding the desk. And on that run, he did like a stinky leg move and froze up one of the defensive backs and zipped right by him. Like, that's a Manning. Yeah, that was something. So, yeah, we're jealous.
And once again, it's Cooper Manning's son. People ask, is that Eli's son or is that Peyton's son? No, that's Cooper Manning's son, and that now makes Cooper Manning the 5th most important Manning of the group.
That's right. He keeps getting knocked down. Steve, are there any things only you care about?
Nobody cares.
Everybody knows nobody cares.
No one cares.
Nobody cares!
I care.
There is. And I don't think anybody saw this because nobody made a big deal or highlight out of it. I'm watching the very end of Illinois and CMU, a game that Illinois won comfortably, and everybody comes out to do the traditional handshake at the end. Coaches meet at midfield or wherever they can find them. In big games that are decided on a last-second field goal, it's a maze to go find the opposing coaches. They might find each other in the end zone. They might find each other at the 30, somebody else's sideline.
A Jim Valvano, like, confusing look up in the air looking for the other coach.
So this one was more traditional. The game was not in doubt. Very few people rushed onto the field. The 2 coaches and the 2 state troopers that bodyguard them, armed, as they usually are, come with them, and Brett Bielema and Jim McElwain shake hands, pat on the back. But what I've never seen before was the state troopers at the same time gave each other a big bro hug.
Okay.
Along with the 2 head coaches right next to them.
Aww.
And I'm like, what?
Why not?
Well, these 2 guys who are dressed in body armor,
game, guys.
With guns, and when you look at them, you don't know if they're a member of SWAT or whether they're the guy that they're going to arrest and put them in jail for life. It could look one and the same. But those 2 guys gave each other a nice pat on the back and a bro hug.
Okay.
Along with the head coaching staff. Well, why not?
We all went through this together. We didn't call the plays, but we were protecting.
We scanned the crowd.
Right.
We did our job. We scanned the crowd, and we kept our head coach safe. Of course, they hadn't left the field yet. There's still something could happen. Maybe that's a premature hug.
Yeah,
because their job is not over yet, and that is the one time they're distracted. They became distracted at that moment, and that's where something could happen.
You've just created an opportunity for someone rushing the field to perhaps exploit, Steve. Well done.
Yeah, but it was the first
now
time I've
Now a lot of
seen
people care about it.
Nobody cares about it.
All right, so probably it's not just Greg, but things only Greg cares about, Steve. Homecoming on September 14th in the 3rd game against Arkansas State. It ruined the whole notion of homecoming, which, yes, was usually an opponent Michigan can beat, but it was often later in the year. It was a time for people to come back to the game, which they could, of course, this game, as we talked about. The cheerleaders and the sweaters and like all the old stuff that you see in homecoming, it didn't have the same feel. Only I care about it, but homecoming, as far as its relationship with football, used to be a big deal on a lot of campuses. we basically punted on homecoming this year, Steve, is what we did.
I understand it because Michigan has such an incredible schedule this year. So, normally you book it where you get the sure win, but you're also booking it from an economic standpoint that maybe not too many people would come to the Arkansas State game. There wasn't a Big Ten team like that, except maybe Northwestern in November. You're not doing homecoming in early November.
Not the last game of the
And look at October schedule. The only home game Michigan has in October is Michigan State.
Right.
And you're not doing homecoming on Michigan State weekend.
You are not.
So that's just kind of the way it felt out. I'm sorry your experience was cheapened.
But only I care about it. So
here's one thing we both care about. Michigan football are the reigning national champions. Go Blue, Greg.
Go Blue.